Good evening. As we wait for the pending snowstorm, just a quick update. So far, so good. School's on for tomorrow. We'll give you an early morning call. Anybody wants it earlier than 4 a.m., we have a sign-up sheet in the back. My name is Brian Sikowski. I'm a superintendent of schools, and it was about a year ago from the date that we had a very big outreach to the community regarding Parcc and the Common Core. It was the controversy of not only New Jersey, but nationally. And we filled this auditorium with about 450 people. We had the assistant commissioner here, we had the county superintendent here, and we had many participants because it was the rage. What was going on with Parcc? What was the new standards? Today, as New Jersey has made a commitment to continue to assess using the Parcc assessment and modify the Common Core standards to be New Jersey's own standards, very little was changed. But as Governor Christie wanted to go around the country and brag about New Jersey's own standards, the Common Core is now soon to be New Jersey's standards. Here in North Brunswick, it was no difficult challenge because the people here you'll hear from tonight were prepared and ready to take on another assessment that would be part of the multiple measures we use to formatively look at your child, look at our programs, and to assess accordingly. But I'm here tonight to really give you the sense that now that the controversy has died down, we still owe it to the community to talk about a review, preview. Where were we? What happened? What were the learnings, the information that we were able to glean about the Parcc assessment, and preview. Where do we go from here? What are the next steps? You as a family, a parent, you should know and have a right to be able to discuss it, and we shouldn't have to wait for controversy. So we're here for a review, preview, and we have plenty of Parcc Rangers here tonight. They're here, and so let me do some introductions. First, I would like to introduce the Board of Education. We have our Board Vice President, Jessica McNulty. Jess, just say hello. Board Member Amanda Guadagnino. Board Member Donna Mikolashevsky. Donna, yes. Board Member Colleen Keefe. Over here, I saw Board Member Rao Bakalagada. So we have a full representation. You folks can't talk because there'll be a full quorum, so you got to sit there and be quiet. Just kidding. I also want to introduce our presenters tonight. Our Jennifer Disler, our new Director of Curriculum and Instruction and Technology. She'll be presenting tonight. Amy Rumbo, Central Office. She's the Supervisor of Assessment and Grants. She really is the Parcc Ranger. And then we'll hear from our K-8 supervisors and our 9-12 supervisors, English Language Arts. We'll hear from Michael Palazzo and Janine Lanphier and Carrie Aloisio, our supervisors, math, science, and various levels, and other North Brunswick administrators. We have many administrators here, and I want to thank them for coming out after a long day for support. They know all this stuff, but they want to be here for a resource for you. So we have Q&As planned, but you know the best time for sometimes to grab administrators after the meeting on the way out. So they'll be here, and we're certainly looking forward to a nice program. With that, I want to introduce the Director of Curriculum and Technology, Ms. Jennifer Disler.
Thanks, Dr. Zakowski. He walks around, I'm going to stay here. First thing I want to just share, actually before I even start with the Parcc stuff, I do have one public announcement. For any of you that have a child that's going to be entering kindergarten in the fall, sign-ups and registration will start at the end of this month. If you know anybody that's going to be a kindergartner, stay tuned. If you go to our website beginning Monday, you'll see all the information. February 29th will be the first week. So I promised that group that I would give that PR announcement. In regards to questions for tonight, we thought that it might be best if you have a question as the night goes on that you jot it down. I have Mr. Kevin Farrell. I gave him a bucket to be able to walk around and collect. So that's his job tonight, among other many things he does for us. But if you do, he'll be walking up and down the aisles. He'll pass out some of the index cards. Our intent tonight is at the end to be able to kind of go through them. Those that are for the good of the group will be able to answer tonight as time allows. But we will put everything as an FAQ on our website so that any question you have tonight, we will answer for you. Also, the presentation tonight, that will go up on our website tomorrow. So like Dr. Z said, our intent tonight is truly to give you a little bit of where we've been, and that's in just reviewing in general, a quick synopsis back of standards. Dr. Z talked a little bit about Parcc and how it's changing, but just a reminder of where we've come from and the Parcc administration from last year, and then preparing for this year. That's our intent in our agenda tonight. Just a show of hands, how many of you attended last year, this presentation? Okay, great. So we're in a definitely different place than we were a year ago. And it's funny because I wasn't here yet, but coming from a neighboring district, we were in the same situation, feeling the same way. And I think all the better we feel a year later and know that we can take the information that we learned and we saw over the Parcc administration last year and take it and move forward this year. Okay, so I want to do a little bit of review of standards and assessment, but just something to point out and to remember, standards aren't new. They've been around since 1996. Assessments aren't new. Really, the new piece to all of this was Parcc, and fortunately for us now, Parcc isn't new. We're just learning more about it and getting better at it. So a quick little history of standards. And like I mentioned, there really hasn't been any set standards until 1996. And for anybody that was a teacher prior to that, and I call it the good old days, and I always feel like I missed it by that much. But in that time, when there weren't standards as a teacher, whether you taught English or math or science, you had the ability to be in your classroom. As long as you were teaching your content, you really had a lot of say over what you wanted to do, how you wanted to do it, when you wanted to do it. And you kind of got to live in your own bubble, in your little silo, and your kids were better for it. And then things started to change. There was, no continuity. What one school in a district was doing compared to another school. So now they all come to the middle school, and kids are having different experiences. So there was change, and districts started to implement standards. And so common assessments started to come into play, common curriculum where we're doing the same thing, hitting the same goals at same times of year. So for example, learning fractions might have happened in the fall, and whether I was in Judd or John Adams, that would have happened. And then came 1996 when the New Jersey core curriculum content standards came into play. And that was 9 different disciplines, everything from math and science and language arts to fine arts and world language. And it was during that time that this was statewide. And so it better helped for children if you moved from one school district to another around the state, that you had the possibility, the ability to be learning the same things. Also, it helped us to compare how we're growing and how we're performing, and it really made a difference. After that came into play, we went national, and the Common Core standards came into play in 2010. And at this point, there's about 43 states that have adopted. And as Dr. Z mentioned, some states are making tweaks to the Common Core. We happen to be one of them, along with Oklahoma and South Carolina, Indiana. There are some other states that are doing the same. But that rigor and the sentiment of Common Core is there. The best part about Common Core is their alignment to our career and college readiness. We're trying to produce kids that are ready to work in the 21st century. The rigor is there, whether we call them the New Jersey standards or the Common Core. It's that same sentiment. Assessments is another story. Again, when I look back at the different kinds of tests there were, it makes me kind of think of where I was when I was in school and what tests I was taking. And just out of curiosity, wondering if you remember any of these tests. One of the first assessments that was given as a standardized assessment was the minimum basic skills. And that was for grades 3, 6, and 9. And that was from 1978 to 1982. So chances are you in this room might have taken that test. From there it changed, and it was the HSPT. It stands for the High School Proficiency Test. It was for 9th graders, and it was for graduation, and it was for reading, writing, and math. That was from 1983 to 1987. Then it changed again, and it changed to the HSPT 11. And this was for high school to take for graduation. And in 8th grade, it was the EWT, the early warning test. And the graduating class of 1994, this was their requirement for that HSPT 11. From there, it changed again. And it changed to the ESPA, as I remember calling it, but the Elementary School Proficiency Assessment, and that was for 4th graders. The GEPA was for 8th graders, the Grade 8 Proficiency Assessment, and then the HESPA was the High School Proficiency Assessment. This was from 2000, the ESPA and the GEPA was till 2008. That went away, and the HSPA stayed intact until just last year. So there's been changes to our assessments, and now, as you know, we're here to talk about Parcc tonight, and that has come into play and will become part of our high school requirement for graduation in later years. There's some shifts in the assessment, and to point out, the first one is interesting because last year, and if you note at the top there, it talks about from the 14 to the 15 school year. So for those of you that saw this last year, this was big news to us a year ago. We were moving from one single test administration to 2 windows. And you're going to hear about the learning lessons there and the changes. But last year when we took Parcc, there were 2 windows. This year there's just 1. We obviously moved from paper-based to digital. And the time of the test has lessened, and who's taking the test has changed. One of the key pieces, too, is in math, that it's no longer just a grade level assessment for math, but it became more content on the course that they were taking. Everything in the NJ Ask leading up to the Parcc test was aligned to the Common Core and put our kids in a good place. And Amy, our supervisor of assessments and grants, will talk a little bit about how we performed last year. Last thing I wanted to share with you before I pass the clicker over to my colleague is just the idea, and this is important for you to know. I didn't ask you what grade level you have of kids at home. So graduation might be in the near future, and it might seem really far away. But part of a graduation requirement isn't just the credits that your kids take in high school. It also is determined that they graduate by the tests that they take and pass. And for years, like I mentioned before, the HSPA was the high school requirement for graduation. It was 1 test, 1 administration, and if a child wasn't successful in that administration, there was other opportunities as they became a senior, and all was well, and we were able to keep track of it easily. There's a little bit of a challenge with that for us now because Parcc isn't our graduation requirement yet. Because it's a baseline, it's a beginning test, it's not being used as a graduation requirement until class of 21, I believe. That's what they're saying now, but things change here and there. But we know at least through the class of 2019 that there are a lot of ways that your child could graduate. And again, we want to point this out because there is opportunity to use the Parcc for a graduation requirement, and it's probably the one free one. So keep that in mind as you make decisions about having your child test. We encourage them to do so. It might be a little hard to read. This, again, will be up on the website, but there's multiple ways for our seniors to show that they're ready to graduate. It could be taking the PSAT, the SAT, the ACT, the AccuPlacer, among other tests. And right now we're working with senior families who are maybe in danger because they opted not to take the Parcc last year, or they haven't taken some of those other tests, or haven't met the cutoff just yet. The process has been demanding on our high school, and they've done a fabulous job. And I look over to Kevin Farrell because his team really, it's now kind of this personalized education for all the kids to figure out what tests they've taken, how they've done, and are they ready to graduate. I could tell you one surefire way for them to have an opportunity to graduate is to take the Parcc test. We saw nice success in it, and you're going to hear again, I don't want to steal any thunder, but you'll hear more about that. But the Parcc test, out of all of those, it's the one that's free. So we do encourage your kids to take the Parcc. We also know that it's very much aligned to SAT type questions. The way that Parcc is trying to get our kids to think and be able to explain and apply will really better them and ready them for some of the tests that will help them get into college. So again, the encouragement there is that Parcc can be a part of graduation. For right now, there's other pieces to graduation, but we deem that important. With that, we want to tell you a little bit about last year's Parcc administration. I'd like to introduce the head honcho of all of this. Without Amy, I don't think we would have Parcc happening in our district. She's detailed and A1 in my book. This is Amy Rumbo. She's the supervisor of assessments and grants. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Good evening. I am the supervisor of assessments and grants, and just a little background also, I'm a North Brunswick, kind of not born but bred. I went to high school here, and my whole teaching career was at Linwood 8th grade, so I recognize some people in the crowd still, so from my teaching days a few years ago. As Jennifer mentioned, I'm going to start with a brief review of the 2015 Parcc administration. And again, we successfully tested over 4,000 students in grades 3 through 11. As we mentioned before, there were 2 testing windows, the performance-based assessment, PBA, and the end-of-year EOY. And again, as mentioned and as the schedule we've posted since September, there is only 1 testing window this year. The state of New Jersey and Pearson worked together and condensed it, so we only have 1 testing window this year. We utilize classrooms, computer labs in grades 6 through 11, also our media centers at Linwood and the high school, and we were able to, with the flexibility that Parcc provides, as opposed to our previous paper-based state assessments, we really had a lot of flexibility to provide both AM and PM sessions for our students, and get testing in and get them back in the classrooms for instruction. Typically, the test was administered by one of the child's teachers, more specifically in grades 3 through 8. Teachers were permitted, and they still are permitted this year with Parcc, to help students with technology-based questions during the test, and they also could clarify directions throughout the testing session. Students are able to flag questions, review them, and change answers more easily on the computer than they were going back and forth with a paper booklet and the erasers with the pencil. So we really saw some great successes as we monitored the testing last year. We did provide additional equipment in all testing locations, spare devices, spare mice. Everything was available for our students if they needed it. One of the unique things about Parcc that we learned last year is, unlike the NJASC or the HASPA, makeup testing could occur at any time throughout the testing window. And that was really important. If a student became ill, was absent any time during those windows, we can easily fluctuate the testing session, stop it, and get a student in, and without a waiting period. And again, really to get them back into the classroom for instruction once testing was completed. We also learned that scheduling practice really worked well for us last year. Our students engaged in the tutorials that Pearson offered, the one-to-one sample items, as well as the practice tests. Pearson has released, as of last Friday, the updated practice tests, sample items, and tutorials, and our students are beginning to do that now. And one of the things that we did learn is, this was the first time students obviously took a test, high-stakes assessment on the computer, but it's the first time they did a math-type test on a computer. And one of the points and one of the lessons learned that our staff and particularly our math supervisors have been engaging in since the fall with our students is practicing the math on the computer and using the equation editor. And I know my math supervisor colleagues will be speaking to that in a little while. To review the way that the scores were, and again, we sent score reports home right before the winter break. Parcc uses 5 performance levels to delineate knowledge, skills, and practices. They go from a level 1 of did not yet meet expectations all the way to a level 5 exceeded expectations. On a student score report, they got 1 for math and they received 1 for language arts if they sat and took both the PBA and EOY. An overall score for all was out of a possible 850, and then they were given one of the 5 performance levels. And again, you can see how it ranges across the screen. So what did the results tell us? As Ms. Disler mentioned, we were quite pleased with our results as a district. NBT schools met or exceeded the Parcc cohort average in 14 out of the 18 tests we administered. And the Parcc cohort are the 12 states that took the test. So as you can see, in English language arts, our grades 3 through 9 either met or exceeded that Parcc cohort average score on those tests. For mathematics, we also did the same for grades 3 through 7, for Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. The district met or exceeded the state average in 12 out of those 18 tests. English language arts, grades 3, 5 through 10. Mathematics, grades 5 and 6. Algebra 1, geometry, and Algebra 2. And it is to note, this was the first year that 8th graders or 7th graders, and we have 7th graders that take Algebra 1 in our district, they took those high school assessments this year. They didn't take a Math 8 or a Math 7. They took Algebra 1 or geometry. So they're also in that cohort there. And again, we're very pleased with the results that we received. The purpose and use of the Parcc data, again, as with any assessment, whether it's a state assessment or a local assessment, it's really just one of multiple measures that assist our teachers, our administrative team, our central office team, really to support our curriculum, our programs, and to differentiate instruction. We use any type of assessment data to inform parents and students on their progress, and with Parcc, colleges and universities are starting to use it as just one of many indicators to check a student's readiness for college and career. So moving on to this year. And the nice thing is, the nice big change is that we are going from the 2 windows to 1 window. And the state has delineated this as the windows for grades 3 through 8. They leave us with April 4th to May 13th, the high school, April 11th to May 20th. And once they came out with this, we had this on the district calendar last year, and then we also posted into September, and I'll review it in a few slides, the school schedules. They give us a 30-day window. We will not be using all 30 days. We, again, with the flexibility and the amount of devices that we have, we are able to condense that and get our students back into the classroom for instruction. Total testing time has been reduced by about 90 minutes. So again, lessons learned that Pearson learned is again, to condense the test. We have been preparing for Parcc for years. Even before it really was our full-on reality. But again, Jennifer mentioned we do have a standards-based curriculum. Instruction and our programs are aligned to the Common Core standards. We have local benchmark assessments that we administer in our and common assessments throughout the district. Technology plan has been in place for years. We have a great infrastructure here. Again, as I mentioned, one of the big highlights from last year is we successfully tested 4,000 students. Any issues were on the Pearson end. We are broadband. We're able to test all these students at one time. Again, we had all 6 buildings testing at one time, and it really with great success. We are continually providing professional development for staff. We really impress upon our staff to use Google Apps for Education. Technology is integrated throughout our K through 12 program. And again, we are emphasizing skills that are also on the Parcc. And our students today are much more tech savvy than I would have been at their age. Such things as drag and drop, highlighting text, cut and paste, graphing tools, practicing typing longer responses that are required for both language arts and again, and math too. As we mentioned last year at our presentation, in 2013, we were selected to have item tryouts at 3 of our elementary schools. 2014, we did field testing at John Adams was selected, Linwood, and the high school. And then again, we had our full administration last spring. Our staff is continually trained in Common Core and Parcc readiness by the NJDOE and also in district. Our staff they received 2 trainings prior to Parcc. one on security, and then one on the technological aspect of administering the test. And we're really proud to say last year we were able to also provide our staff with protocols. We provide them with the scripts ahead of time, probably about 4 to 6 weeks before the test, so that they feel confident going into administering the test to your child. And really, again, we saw great success with that. We continually provide differentiated professional development. And again, we frequently use the Parcc tutorials, sample items, and practice tests. And again, if your child took the test last year, this is all public. So we have the link here. We have it on our website as well, that at home they can practice as well. It's an open site. So I want to just briefly look at the schedule. Again, this is on our website, our elementary schedule for grades 3 through 5. Fifth grade will be testing first, and math will be testing first. This year, elementary will have, and had last year, 4 units of math. So they will have 4 days, and ELA only has 3. So it was an administrative decision to have math go first, those first, 4 days. So you can see the schedule here. We do have an early closing on April 14th. We will use that day for makeups. The middle school schedule, middle school and high school, ELA and math are 3 days each. So, and again, as I mentioned, we are very fortunate that we have several hundred students taking Algebra 1 or geometry at our middle school. So we will be testing math second, again, to provide them with that additional instruction. As Jennifer mentioned before, those graduation requirements are starting to come into play with those Parcc scores. Excuse me. So math will be tested second. We're very fortunate at the high school with the amount of computer labs that we have that we can test whole grade levels in one setting. For example, we can test 9th grade language arts in the morning, and we could test 10th grade math in the afternoon. So you see our scheduled dates are here. One thing, again, is, as Jennifer mentioned earlier, Algebra Geometry, Algebra 1 Geometry, and Algebra 2. Those are course level. It's not by grade level. So if you have a child that's a senior for math in one of those courses, they have to take that. Thank you. I'm sorry, I've been battling a sore throat all week, so my apologies. So again, you see our testing schedule there for the high school. Lastly, I just want to touch upon our Learning Center and ESL students. Again, any students that are identified from grades 3 through high school will test in an appropriate setting. For example, ESL students will test in small groups with other ESL students. And again, if for any identified students, if they have an individualized plan and revisions are necessary, you will hear from their case manager. At this time, I'd like to bring up Dr. Kane Ellis and Mrs. Mercedes Chang to talk about English language arts. My apologies again.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. I'm Mercy Chang, Supervisor of Language Arts K-8. Can you hear me well there? Okay. Do you want to introduce yourself?
And Dr. Kane Ellis, I'm the English Supervisor at the high school.
So before we review some of the ELA important items, I just want to thank, I don't know if there are any teachers here, but we do provide the curriculum, but the teachers do execute it, and we did perform really well. We're really proud of our student scores, but I want to give kudos to the teachers who did all of the work. So if any of you are here, thank you. Technology. Yeah, good. So in English language arts, students are expected to do a lot of things with really complicated texts. If you were here last year, we talked a little bit about the difference between NJ Ask and Parcc, and there were some changes in the rigor. Students have to read really complex texts, both informational and literary, so we're not just reading a lot of fiction anymore. We have to make sure that kids are able to read nonfiction because the world revolves around nonfiction. We have to make sure that the texts are complex, so they're all on grade level. So if your child is reading a little bit below grade level, we're certainly doing a lot to help them meet expectations, but if they're not yet there, the test may feel a little bit difficult for them. And lastly, students have to write, but instead of writing things that are fictional or creative things, they have to really write to the things that they're reading about. So they have to support some arguments and just be able to defend their opinions.
I need it higher, Mercy. In order to succeed on the ELA Park section, students really need to be comfortable with reading passages like Ms. Chang was talking about in science and social studies, and those nonfiction pieces that we've really been focusing on K through 12, exposing them to it. Perhaps when we were in high school that focused more on the literature, we like to create a balance in our program so our students are able to read across the curriculum. Focusing on analyzing primary text, using evidence to support their claims about those primary texts. We also have been emphasizing that students be able to understand and compare authors' points of view, so multiple texts at the same time. What is this author saying in response to this author? How does this text help us understand more about that text or about that perspective? So we're really helping our students be able to integrate those skills so that they'll be successful on the park. And the other one is understanding how point of view influences the author's perspective.
So these are the same sample items that we showed you last year, but the park is not much different other than only one testing window. In terms of the content remains the same. This is the Amelia Earhart example. The students have to watch a video, and then they have to answer 2 questions. But the tricky part is that answer B is contingent on answer A being correct. So that's really super important. If you guys have internet, which I know most of us do, and your kids can watch videos on National Geographic and answer questions about nonfiction ideas, that's really super helpful. That's just one type of question. This other one is more technologically based, and the kids have to drag and drop their response. So there are multiple answers, and they might have to drag and drop more than one. Over on the left, the text always remains there for them to reference because we want them to use evidence from the text.
The third example that we have up there to share with you looks at the written response, where students are still asked to write an essay in sorts. This one in particular, you can see that there's 2 texts that they can toggle back and forth between, Daedalus and Icarus, and a poem called To a Friend. So in this, they're asked to use 2 different readings that they've already answered some of those questions that Ms. Chang talked about, and now write an essay that looks at both of those texts and drawing conclusions based on those 2 together.
Lastly, your support has really obviously worked, and we really appreciate it. Do you have a question? Did you write it down on the index card? You didn't have one. Mr. Farrell will come down and give it to you. Parents, whatever you did last year really worked, and your support is super helpful to us. So some things that you can do at home that are free are, if you're having dinner conversations with your kids and they're making comments or they have opinions, ask them to support their opinions, to defend their thinking. Encourage your child to read more nonfiction. We have, at the K-8 level, at least 2 units of study per grade that are nonfiction, but the more they can read at home, the better. If you can, encourage your child to read multiple texts on the same topic. So if they like snakes, buy them 2 books on snakes by 2 different people because the perspectives will be different. We have linked here, which you'll have on the website tomorrow, Newsella. It's a free site where you can access lots of really cool, engaging nonfiction. And lastly, if you have a computer and your kids have homework, if you can have them type it, it really helps them feel more confident when they're typing essays during Park.
We're now going to transition into the mathematics section of the park, and so we have our supervisors, Ms. Carrie Aloisio and Ms. Janine Lamphere from the middle school and the high school to talk about the items and the expectations on math. And Michael Palazzo, who will talk more about the elementary K-5 expectations.
Good evening. I'm Carrie Aloisio. I'm the mathematics supervisor at the high school. So in a similar fashion, there are 3 general sets of expectations for students on the Park assessment. The first is to solve problems in the major and minor content areas of their course or grade level. So when we get descriptions about what students need to know for the tests, they're highlighted for us, things that are major, really important focuses of the course, things that are minor, not as important, might not have as many questions, and then supporting content. So they are expecting them to be able to solve problems in all of these areas. Also, expressing, just like in the ELA part, make an argument. How do you know what you know? I talked to my daughter about this, and she says to me, I don't want to make the argument, Mommy, I want to decide the argument. So, and lastly, they need to be able to solve real-world problems and put their mathematical knowledge to use. So it's really about knowing your math, being able to make your computations, and then being able to put it to work for you in the real world. So essentially, to be able to do all these things, they just need to exhibit the skills of a good mathematician at a grade level appropriate point, and also for their specific course that they're in. So here's some things that would be considered characteristics of a good mathematician. You can have a look at the list, but it's not anything that is extraordinary or something you would think is, you know, unusual. Basically, we're looking for them to be able to solve problems, to think about numbers in different ways, to be able to explain and make an argument about their decision or their solution, to build a model or to represent their mathematics in an algebraic or equation fashion, to be able to choose the tools appropriately that they need to solve the problem. So do I need a calculator? Do I need a ruler? Should I draw a picture? Those kinds of things. Attend to precision. Do I work carefully? Do I check my answers? Do I use the proper vocabulary when I am making my argument or justifying my reasoning? So remember, attending to precision is not always about just getting the right answer. It's about using the proper words to communicate what you think the solution to your problem is. Look for and make use of structure. Really, that just means, do I know how to solve new problems? Can I take my math and apply it to a unique situation? And again, look for and express regularity in reasoning is, can I find patterns? You know, do I see a system coming through here? Can I make a prediction about what's about to happen? So again, just skills that any mathematician would have, again, at the appropriate level for their grade or course. One thing we always get questions about is, what is the calculator policy for the test? So this is the updated version of the Parcc calculator policy. For grades 3 through 5, there really is no calculator policy because they don't get to have a calculator. So it's important for their facts and for you to spend some time at home with them working on their fluency. Again, in grades 6 through 7, only a 4-function calculator. Grade 8 is a scientific calculator, and at the high school, all of the tests that the students take, a graphing calculator similar to the TI-84 is what is required. Each test that allows a calculator has some questions that are calculator accessible and some that are not. So at any level, whether they have a calculator or not, fluency is critical. And this is just a quick glimpse at what is expected for them to be able to do without the use of a calculator. I'm not going to read through it for you, but if you want to take a second and find your student's grade level, please keep in mind that if I have a student in 4th grade, it's not just the 4th grade fluency that I'm concerned about. They need to be efficient in the 3rd grade, the 2nd grade, and the 1st grade list as well. So they sort of all build upon each other. And this will be part of, you know, they said this is going to be posted for everyone, so if you don't get a chance to see it now, you'll be able to access it again later. And Mr. Palazzo is going to walk you through some of the elementary examples.
At the elementary level, we're very proud of the Everyday Math 4 program that's been put in from K through 5 over the last 2 years. It parallels, it is keyed into the CCSS, and your students all, and hopefully you've seen this, all have online access at home as well. I encourage you to use that. The format of Everyday Math 4 follows, is totally tied in to the Parcc testing. They parallel each other. This is a typical example where they would have to do a little bit of calculator manipulation, mouse manipulation on the computer, use the slider, make a decision, and then later on give a rationale for why they did it. In all the cases, the work they do in the classroom whether it's in their math journals, whether it's online, or using Rocket Math, all builds their automaticity, or all builds to their fluency that's tested K through 5, 3 through 5 on the Parcc.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Janine Lamphere. I'm here to talk about what we do at Linwood to help make sure that students are college and career ready as they get ready to go off to the high school and continue their studies in mathematics. So here you have an example of a type 2 question. So there are 3 different types of questions that students might encounter on the math portion of the Parcc. You saw an example of type 1 at the elementary school. This is an example of a type 2 question, and this is just a middle school example. In this instance, we're accessing some of the major shifts of the Common Core as they are assessed through the Parcc test. One of the shifts is that students need to be able to apply their mathematics in some kind of a real-life context. So in this instance, it happens to be a baking context. But students have to be able to manipulate their fractions within this type of a problem with the muffins. In this example, there are 2 parts. The first part is looking a little bit more at the student's ability to manipulate the basic problem, understand and interpret what's going on. And what's important in the part A of this question is that this is looking at how the idea of ratios, rates, and proportions follow through the Common Core at different grade levels. So in the prior example at the elementary school, students were looking to simply understand equivalent fractions. As they get into a real-world context, they have to do a little bit more. And this demonstrates the idea of coherence in the standards. So instead of students having to focus on every different area of mathematics every year, the standards are constructed in a way that students can develop a deeper understanding in selected areas over a grade level band. So as students are working more to understand their fractions, at this grade level, and this is 8th grade, students have been working on rates, ratios, and proportions, and this is a fluency question. So you heard Ms. Aloisio talk about fluency, and I think we all have a pretty good understanding of fluency, especially when Mr. Palazzo talked about being automatic with your math facts. In this instance, fluency is talking about equivalent expressions, equivalent ways of seeing the same quantity, of understanding the same problem. And so there are 2 possible correct answers. And for students to receive their credit for this question, they need to be able to see both perspectives of this problem. There are 2 correct answers, and in case you were wondering, you were wondering, huh? Okay. Drum roll? Okay. So it's 1/24 of a cup of milk is used to make each muffin, and so these are rates. So students need to understand, and by 8th grade they should, that if they flip it, the opposite perspective would be F, 1 cup of milk is used to make every 24 muffins. And so again, students are expected not just to be able to come up with one way of understanding, but they need to come up with multiple ways of understanding depending upon your perspective. And that's what fluency means in the middle school. As part 2, or part B to this question, students have to extend their thinking and explain, if there were 12 muffins, how many batches can you make with a gallon of milk? So now they take and extend it a little bit more, and they have to show their work, explain how they found their answer. At the 8th grade level, for different students, this might take upon a different perspective of how they explain their thinking, but they do have to defend their answer. So that idea of the rigor of explaining and supporting one's answer is consistent throughout language arts and mathematics. You'll see here that students have to use the online equation editor that Ms. Aloisio mentioned earlier, And so this is why we talk about having students get hands-on with technology to practice being able to show their thinking, not just by using a paper and pencil, but by using the keyboard, the keypad, the mouse, etc. So students are engaging with the technology in different ways. This open-ended portion of the assessment is not machine scored. So this type of question includes the first part, which is machine scored. It's a multiple select, but this part is not machine scored. And that's necessary in order to truly assess the depth of our new standards, because a standard old multiple choice question is not going to be able to assess the depth. So the first one was the multiple select, and this one will be where students will be putting their information in. And again, we do practice at Linwood to do this. We also teach your students how to defend their thinking. So I'm sorry, moms and dads, when you have middle schoolers, we are teaching them how to justify their thinking and defend and argue a little bit. So that is an important part of the standards, and those are some of the kinds of things that we do at Linwood to make sure that students are ready. Specifically, we have a variety of technology tools that allow us to give students the opportunity to practice these kinds of things, but also our teachers in math at Linwood have been developing other types of technology-delivered examples. So using Google Forms, etc., students can use multiple select, they can type. We use the equation editor that's available through Pearson so that students have an opportunity to practice all these ways of responding and show their understanding. And next, Ms. Aloisio is going to come back and talk about a high school example.
So this last example falls into the category of a type 3 question, which is essentially the kinds of questions that deal with the modeling and the justification of reasoning. Please keep in mind, we've shown you 3 different kinds of questions: a technology enhanced question, which is computer-based; second type of question, which is a combination of the computer scored and the students expressing it in writing using the editor; and the type 3, which is the modeling and reasoning questions. I know we showed an example from each grade level, but all of the students at every grade level will have type 1, type 2, and type 3 questions on the assessment. We just wanted to give you a sort of a peek at each grade level, each grade span, so you had some sort of idea of what to expect. So this is a question from the Algebra 1 sample test, essentially involving 2 different runners. One runner starts at a specific time, running at a specific rate. The other one starts a few seconds later. Of course, the question is, who wins the race and why? So the first part of this question, Part A and Part B, are both used by their solutions are expressed using the equation editor. In the first part, the students need to build the model, which is essentially the equation for each runner, and then decide who wins the race. And in the second part of the question, they need to use their solution to show why their answer is correct, or to justify or explain why their answer is correct. Again, you will see something grade level appropriate, similar to this structure on every Parcc assessment that's given. Okay, so it's really very simple, the things you can do to support your students at home. Just like we're asking them to do on the test, we would ask you to practice those skills that make a good mathematician when you're with them at home. Make sure that you are encouraging them to really make an effort to solve those problems. If they come home and they say, I don't understand this, or I don't know what to do, I don't know how to get started, ask them those guiding questions. What do you know? What don't you know? What is the question? What have you tried? Those kinds of things that will encourage them to keep going and not just give up if they don't understand the prompt on the first try. Practice your fluencies, practice your technology skills, and the last one, everyone laughs at me. But, really show your love for fractions at home. Research shows that a student's success with fractions in 3rd and 4th grade is the greatest predictor of whether or not they will be a successful algebra student when they come to me in high school. So it's highly critical that you are practicing fractions at home And I know the teachers are doing everything they can to conceptually build those skills at the elementary level. But anything you can do to support that one specific skill will reap many benefits for your students in years to come, and not just in 3rd and 4th grade when they're first being introduced to them. Before we move on to the end, there was one question that came in on the index cards that is specific to math, so I'm going to address that right now. The question was, do 7th graders in the algebra class take the regular math Parcc or the Algebra 1 Parcc? So any student that is enrolled in an algebra course, regardless of the grade level, will take the algebra exam. Similarly, if you have a student in Linwood that is in geometry, they will take the geometry Parcc assessment. So it gets to be course specific. 7th and 8th grade is more of a combination of grade level and course, depending upon what specific path of study your student is taking. But if they are enrolled in an algebra course, regardless of the grade level, that is the test that they take. Oh, you have one too? Okay.
I'm going to go backwards because it's on a slide. I do want to tag on to what Ms. Aloisio said. In terms of algebra courses at Linwood, you do need to see if it's an Algebra 1 Part 1. We have students in 8th grade in Algebra 1 Part 1. It is not a completion course for algebra. It is not a full year course. They do not complete the entire study. So those students will take the 8th grade Parcc. But otherwise, if they are in a full year algebra course at Linwood or a full year geometry course, they will take the high school equivalent. I had a question come in on slide number 35. So the question was, if the question just stated, mark which statement is true, then if the student marks only 1 out of 2, since the question is singular, will they be docked points? So if you notice, it says underneath, select each correct answer. In order for students to truly demonstrate fluency, they must understand that they have to see the question from both sides. Some of these types of questions have more than 2 possible correct answers. In order for students to be fluent, they must see everything. So one of the things you can do at home is really encourage your child, whenever they do any kind of work, to be thorough, to go back and check what they've done, because if a student saw A and sort of in their mind checked it off as well as on the computer checking it off as done, and they don't see F all the way at the bottom, they will not get any points for having the fluency in this case. Okay? Thank you.
So Mrs. Disler is going to come back up and finish us out.
Good job, guys. Thank you, math team. All right, so a couple questions have come in, and I think the first one that I can answer is actually in these slides coming up. The question asks about, will there be more preparation, more content available online or in print form? And the answer is yes, and we've provided on our website opportunity for you to get all that information. And I have to tell you, we get broadcasts that come in usually on Tuesdays, and we always look for those Parcc announcements to come in. And on a weekly basis, there are updates to Parcc. And right now, some of the updates are more material. So what I'm about to show you is our site, and this is what it looks like. There's just a snapshot of it. But if you go to our home website and click on, there's an area for you to click on for Parcc, it'll bring you to this page, and then you can see on the left-hand side all that light blue. That's all of the resources there. It's the same place from last year. It is all updated, and as new resources come in, they're there for you. So please, definitely, you can link right to this page from this slide, or on this next slide, that brings you right to our website, and you can click from there. As new Parcc practice comes in, we're sending it right home to you. The other places where you could check are the other 2 links. The NJDOE, the state website, they have their own Parcc page, as well as Pearson, and that's who puts out the test. So those are the resources. Some other questions that have come in we're going to start to address. One of them is an ELA question, so I'm just going to ask Mercy to come on up to answer that one. And please, if you have other questions, I know that Kevin has been making the rounds. He'll pick up your index card.
All
I'll use the computer since I have trouble with the clicker. A parent wanted to know the grade levels of the samples. So I'm just gonna, I scrolled back to the first one. This is a middle school example, but I want you to know that your students at the elementary school might also have to see a video and also answer Part A and Part B questions. So the content, Amelia Earhart, is middle school, but the idea of the test is for everyone. This next example is an elementary example. So you can tell by the titles of the text, the cricket and the cougar, I think it's called. But again, the idea of having to drag and drop will be relevant to all students. And the last example, the writing one, was a high school example. And then a parent wanted to know about the resources on Newsela. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, I want you to know that Newsela is not a place for you to like practice park taking. It's just a place for you to find really good nonfiction. You can adjust the reading level, you can change it, which is really nice for your students who might not be reading exactly at grade level. You can read articles and take quizzes after, so in that sense, it might feel a little parkish, but it will not have the look of park, and it is not intended to be park practice. We do give teachers lots of resources for making sure that their students feel prepared. So in the sense of, will they feel confident in what they're seeing on the screen when they take the park? They will, because we'll make sure that they do. And at home, we just want you to make reading lots of fun. Did I answer your question? Thank you.
Okay, there are some really great questions asked by the group, so I appreciate the time that you put into jotting them down. One question, quick one, will science be added to the park curriculum? At this point, no. We haven't gotten any information on that, so that's a no. And we do have the new generation science standards, so with new standards, there always could be new assessments, but we're putting those into adoption, some of our grades starting next year. So I would say more to come on that, but at this point right now, it's a no. Does the park score count towards scholarships? And the only way I could answer this is that we're recommended by the state right now not to use park for the sole being for any kind of placement. It could be part of our equation, something to look at, but not the end-all be-all or the determining factor. I really can't say what schools are doing for scholarships, and I would guess that they're going to use the same philosophy that the state is suggesting. South Brunswick School District provides individual computers to kids. When are we planning to do this? Funny thing is, that's where I came from, and I know they're not. So they don't have one-to-one. They have Chromebooks just like we do here. They, I would guess, and I would say, and from what I've seen in both places, I think they started out with more than we have, but we're working to fill that capacity. We've added Chromebook carts to every school this year, multiple carts to the middle school, multiple carts to the high school. So we're looking to make our ability to test more kids greater. So I think we're starting to see the difference this year as we were planning for the test dates. Quick question about Algebra 1, and do students, are they provided a calculator, or should they bring? They are provided a calculator. We, the district, will give them one. There's also the ability to utilize the calculator on the computer. This question came up a couple times and talks about the time of year when we're taking the test, and will we have a complete curriculum taught by April and May? And the answer to that is there's not an expectation for them to complete the course. Park looks at a marker of about 85% of the coursework being finished. So that's where the testing comes into place. So there's no expectation for that a child, so let's take Algebra 1, there's no expectation that they've completed the course, but they're about that place in the content. And again, just to put out there, we don't determine when the kids take the test. That's imposed on us by the state. So we have that park window that we have to adhere to. So this is a good question too. I'm going to go back to that slide about graduation, and I'm going to have to go back far. Sorry, guys. So this question is, if your child or high school student passes the park or gets a score that meets graduation requirements as a freshman or sophomore, why do they take it again? So that's a big question, right? So what's the reason? And I'm a mom of two high schoolers myself, so I'm going to be battling this with them when they say, hey, Ma, why do I have to do this? But the answer is, the book answer from the state is that they expect us to test our kids on a yearly basis in English language arts and algebra and geometry and algebra 2 during their high school years. That's the expectation. They require public schools to test students annually in these areas. What I can say to you, and I said it earlier, these tests, the Parcc test, is a way for your child to prepare for their standardized tests for college. So it's similar to the SAT. It puts them in that same situation, same kind of thinking. So that's your answer there on that one. The question now, again, keeping with these graduation requirements, is what happens to students if they fail the Parcc? They're not held to have to take that same grade level over. So if they're a freshman, they would just continue on and hopefully have the growth and meet the requirement the next year. But for our seniors, it's a little tricky, like I mentioned, for the next couple of years. At least through the class of 2019, Parcc isn't the only way that they demonstrate that they can graduate. There are other tests that they can take. We encourage you as parents to have your kids take the PSAT. It's actually an initiative here, a big push from Dr. Zakowski, so that all of our students have that opportunity, and we actually pay for our sophomores to take the PSAT. So that's an opportunity for them to do that right here at the high school. The other options are there, but if let's say that all happens and they don't meet the cutoffs, there's something called a portfolio process, and it's just tasks, and they get guidance and resources from the teachers here in our building to help them pass the test. This is very similar to the HSPA. HSPA. This was the process that was in place if a student didn't pass that test. As a senior, they had opportunity to go through a portfolio process. Same idea here. Let me look to see. You got more? Okay. Same one. Okay. Okay, our 5th grade Parcc results used in middle school for anything. And again, we use multiple measures. So Parcc isn't the determining factor. It's a baseline number this year. So really, and it's a year behind. So it's just a small piece. We're really looking at what teachers have to say, how students are performing on our common assessments, how their grades are and their performance are throughout the year. Will Parcc be, that's the same question. Let me do some of these too. I think that one was answered. Why does middle schoolers have both ELA and math tests on the same days? So we apologize if there was a misunderstanding. They don't. Did we already answer that? The dates were wrong up there. So, okay, so we apologize. They do not test on the same day in both ELA. And it's ELA is the first 3 days, and then they take the math part. So good eyes. Thank you. We'll fix that. Okay, correct on the website, wasn't right there, but we'll make it right there. How did we fare with the time limit last year? Were the students able to finish on time? Yes. Were they given more time? No, they didn't need it. It was the option if they did, but they didn't, and they were able to complete it. Is the time limit strictly enforced? It is, and that comes down to us from the state. Okay, that same about the time, April and May, the state tells us that. If the student is in advanced ELA and math in 6th grade, do they take the regular 6th grade test? Yes, there's not a specialized advanced placement test, so it's only algebra, geometry, and algebra 2 that there's a little bit separate designation. Otherwise, it's a grade level test for both ELA and math. Is the practice test available on Pearson good enough? Yeah, it's going to be very similar to what they see can be used. And my guess, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, probably the test practice samples this year are probably ones they've used last year. So they'll take some out, not because they're not going to use them, but just they're going to be putting new ones in. So you're going to see probably better examples this year than ever before. Do they get a mouse? not a real one, but they get a mouse if they want to use one. When Amy said before the mice, it made me be like, oh, no mice, but you know what we mean. Do I get my third grader to practice on a desktop or laptop? Anything is fine. Just practicing on a keyboard is going to help your kids. So the more that they can practice typing, it doesn't have to be perfect. You know, when we learned typing way back when, it was the home row, and we still want that for kids. But I don't know how many of you see how fast they type and how they do it. I don't tell them to use their thumbs like texting, but just getting on the keyboard and getting comfortable with where the keys are will help them. Any other questions, Ms. Rumbo? Okay, so in terms of practice, our curriculum are Common Core aligned, not solely test prep, and continual technology infused lessons. Pearson just released an update to tutorial. So you're the answer. I didn't read the question. I'm like, you're giving me the answer. All right, will Parcc assessments be counted this time for advanced subjects, and how important? Oh, yeah. And she can't speak, so she's telling me. I think the point that Amy wants to make is that we're not just teaching like a test prep district. Everything that we're teaching embedded to our curriculum is helping our kids to be successful on this test, but it's the curriculum that we're focused on. Okay. Pearson just released an update tutorial. With that in mind, especially for any parents of third graders that are taking it for the first time, we will assure that all of our kids, our third graders, get that practice time in class. Other classes might do so, but for sure third graders to see it in action. Okay. With that, I believe we've answered the questions that you've had for us. Mr. Farrell's making one more round. So what were the lessons learned, and how are you changing the program in 2016? Some of that was highlighted here tonight. It's posted in this presentation, and it's also in the FAQ. But really, we learned how to streamline the administration, but we also got a good sense of how to get our kids more acclimated to the computer. We're embedding technology on a daily basis. We can't keep the Chromebooks in one location. They're in every classroom. They're every day, and I can't wait to get more in there. That's the best way for us to prepare, for kids to be using them on a daily basis, for them to be comfortable, for them to be thinking. Those are lessons learned, and I think it's just as we grow from one year to the next. If you want to see some of the specifics as just far as the management of it back in this presentation, as well as some FAQs on our website. With that, we want to thank you. For those of you that came last year, this was a 3-hour night. This year, we really wanted to highlight the parts that we felt you needed to see. Again, this information will be up on our website. I can't thank our administration enough for being here. Those of you that presented, thank you. Dr. Zakowski, for your support always, and board members for being here with us. Parents, we're gonna be great again, and we appreciate your time. We'll be sticking around, some of us up here, so if you want to see us, but otherwise get home safe and beat the snow. Good night. Thank you.